theme that runs through the three readings is, where is justice? You'll see this theme over the next few weeks shown to us in various ways. It's almost as if, the readings are kind of pounding home a message at the end of the liturgical year, which focuses really on the end of life. Habakkuk, one of the minor prophets, he was the leader of the temple choir. I didn't even know the temple had a choir, but he's the leader of it. And he is someone who lives somewhere and preaches somewhere between the year 612 BC and 588 BC. Why? Well, why would he come forward and do this? Well, his message is, God, people are doing all kinds of things wrong. Where is your justice? Why are they sort of able to get away with this? Aren't you going to punish them? And so he begins to predict that punishment will be coming. Now, historically, the northern kingdom of Israel has been conquered in 721 by the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrian Empire was ruling the whole area for some time. But all of a sudden, this other large amalgam of soldiers and people called Babylon began to invade Assyria. And in 612, they conquered the Assyrian capital, Nineveh. And the people of any substance fled to a town called Haran and kind of reassembled the government. But the Babylonians came and conquered that city in 609. And the Egyptians who had come to their aid are also then defeated in 605 at Carchemish. And so it becomes pretty clear what's going to happen. And Habakkuk basically then says, because you have been worshiping false gods, the gods of Assyria, the gods of Moab, not just the God of Israel, you will be punished by the Babylonians. And indeed, in 597, Nebuchadnezzar comes down and conquers Jerusalem, and the people still revolt, still have an alliance with Egypt, and are fully conquered in 587 BC, when, as I said before in other sermons, the city and the temple are leveled. So the message of Habakkuk is that God will get you. It just maybe a little bit later. So he's predicting that, this is going to happen. Justice is coming. Not going to come today, but it's coming, and you're going to get yours. Paul is basically saying justice is coming, not in the future, right now. And God is watching. He's talking to the people of Thessalonica. Thessalonica was a city that was founded during the time of Alexander the Great. And one of Alexander's generals, Cassander, established the city and named it after Alexander the Great's sister, Thessalonica. It was a port in northern Greece, was then Macedonia, and very fertile lands. It's about 75 miles to the west of Philippi. You've heard of the Epistle to the Philippians. Well, this is those two cities Paul had been in. Paul was evicted from Philippi, went to Thessalonica in the year 50 AD, spent about 3 months there, was then evicted from that city because the Jews got jealous that so many people were coming over and becoming Christians. And so he proceeded further down and went to Athens and then Corinth. But when he gets there, he's kind of wondering how the people are doing. And so he sends Timothy and Silvanus up to see what's happening. And he also writes a couple of letters. And the first letter he writes in the year 50, and this letter he writes in the year 51. And his message is that, there will be a day when Jesus comes back to judge those who have been, either good or bad during their lifetime. The day of judgment. Now, his understanding, and the understanding of most of the people at that time, was that day was going to be imminent, within the next couple of years. But they pictured an actual day, when God, in the form of Jesus, would come back to earth and then would judge the living and the dead. And they were kind of course, scared of that. And so Paul is saying, justice is coming very imminently. Well, it's 2,000 years later, and that day has not yet come. So what does that quite mean? You get a picture, a first glimpse of it in the gospel. And the gospel tells the story of a tax collector. Last week I was telling you that in the temple there was a Pharisee and a tax collector, and Jesus was noticing the difference between the two. One observing the letter of the law, the Pharisee, and the publican, the tax collector, observing the spirit of the law by being truly repentant. Well, okay, here is an actual tax collector, Zacchaeus, who apparently is a short man. And Jesus is coming through the area, and so he climbs a sycamore tree. A sycamore tree has a big base to it, and its lateral limbs are pretty low to the ground. So it's easy for this little guy to climb this tree. It's not like he has to shimmy up the tree to get to a branch. The branches are fairly low. And there, he calls out to Jesus. Now, as a tax collector, if you remember what I told you last week, he would come to your house with 4 soldiers, and if you couldn't pay the tax, the soldiers were there to take you to jail. And he would usually charge more than he should. Graft was common. And so, when he is criticized, what he says to Jesus, as you heard in the gospel, that he would give half of what he owns to the poor. And he'd pay back 4 times if there had been any graft that he committed. He probably knows there hasn't been, but therefore he's thinking, I don't have to go through with this. But it's pretty bold to say, I'm going to pay back 4 times. At any rate, people still think of him as, a lowlife in their society. Why would Jesus actually go into this man's house and have a meal? He would become impure by associating with this man. Well, now comes Jesus' message, which is that, I haven't just come for those who are good. I've come for those who are bad. I haven't come just for those who do the right thing. I've come for those who do the wrong thing, to try to get them to change. If you think about it, what good am I if I'm only talking to those in church? I want to talk to those who are outside of church, who don't come to church, who don't believe in coming to church. I have to reach out into society to hopefully bring people to their senses to come back. And that's what Jesus is saying about reaching out to Zacchaeus. But then, this makes one think, okay, so you've been good all your life. And Zacchaeus has been kind of a crumb most of his life. And so late in his life, he gets forgiven. Well, maybe you should have been mean most of your life too, if at the end of your life you can say, I'm sorry, and somehow be forgiven. And it's all wiped clean when you go to heaven. How is this just? This becomes even clearer in a couple of weeks when the gospel will focus on the good thief on the cross, who has been really bad most of his life, to the point that he's being executed. And he begs forgiveness of Jesus on the cross. And Jesus tells him, this day you will be with me in paradise. Now, there's a powerful message there. Remember, Paul was thinking that the day of Christ was going to be imminent, but a couple of years from now maybe. And there's still people who think that it's coming, at the end of time. But that's kind of a too simplistic reading of Scripture. That's not quite understanding what Jesus was trying to convey. Because if Jesus told the good thief, this day, today, before the sun sets, you will be with me in paradise. It's not coming, sometime 1,000 years from now. It's coming today. And so when you die, you're not going to go into some state of Never Land and just sort of hang there for 1,000 years. You're going to take your last breath here, followed by your first breath there. You're going to be in paradise the second after you die. How wonderful is that? But that moment when you die is when you face Jesus, when you face God, when you receive the justice for your behavior. And the judgment of God is to respect your judgment. You've chosen to be selfish, manipulative, taking advantage of other people, hurting them so you could get ahead in the corporate world. Well, if you've chosen to be selfish, you will be selfish for eternity. You will be spiritually empty. You will not know how to be close to anyone. You'll only think of how you can sort of manipulate it to your advantage, but there's no way you can do that in the afterlife. You're in perfect health, but oh my God, I'm just so sad, and I wish it could be different, but it can't, because this is just the way I'm made. The choices I've made have formed my personality, and I'm stuck with that personality for eternity. Whoa. By contrast, those of us who have learned to love and care for one another and reach out to someone when they're in trouble have thought less of ourselves and more of how we can help the other, have learned how to love more deeply our wife, our husband, our partner, our children, our friends. We have a richness to our life. We have learned how to connect. And so when we die and are placed in the presence of our mom and dad who have gone before us and our relatives and friends, we're going to be having a wonderful time. We're going to be very, very happy. That you go to an afterlife is due to God. How you go to the afterlife is due to you. And so, again, the message of all of these Sundays is wake up, carpe diem. This day isn't coming again. And okay, Habakkuk was sort of saying the same thing, Paul was saying the same thing, but they were referring to something way down the road. And your way down the road is when you die, which hopefully is way down the road, but you never know. You never know. So it's not like you're going to be able to wiggle out from under the bad decisions you've made. So Zacchaeus, okay, he begins to change. But gosh, his behavior from the past has kind of formed him a bit. It's going to be hard for him to change. It's going to be hard for him to grow. He'll do it, but he's starting late, and so he can't really grow as much as somebody else has been working on it their whole life. Or the good thief, okay, so he changes on the cross, dies an hour later. What growth could he have in an hour? So the point being, you're not in either of those two situations. You are alive. You've been working on this all your life. Continue to work on it. Don't get smug. Don't think you're better than other people, but continue to work on it for your own happiness.
Amen.
Amen.